Advices Radio Network.
The views and opinions of Muscle Minds is for informational and educational purposes only.
Better, stronger, faster. Early on. Better, stronger, faster. Speed, faster. Once before.
Welcome back to Muscle Minds. This program is brought to you by True Nutrition. You can use our code ADVICES for savings and to let them know that you support the program. I'm Scott McNally, and of course, with me, as always, fresh back from California, Dr. Scott Stevenson. What's up, man?
It's not that fresh.
It's fresh to me.
Right. You just think I'm fresh. That's what it is.
Yeah. So
that's funny. That was the term. Oh, that's like 20 years ago. Man, that's so fresh.
Funky fresh.
So rad. Funky fresh.
Fresh. Did you ever say that? Do you remember ever saying that, like in working it into? No.
I'm cringing, but I think I don't know if I may have said it facetiously.
Okay.
You know, probably like just like when someone would come in wearing parachute pants.
Yeah.
And I would just, man, those pants are fresh.
Yeah.
Just to fuck with them. I don't think I ever actually used that word as like a serious part of my vernacular. I think that was just like, I don't know. That was just too, I was a white kid in the Midwest. You know, I can only be so cool.
True, but Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was like being played everywhere, and I think that they were targeting us white kids from the Midwest. You know,
that's true. And I do like Will Smith. I like his music, man. So maybe they hooked me. I didn't know it. I'm gonna start saying fresh. There's it's funny, just as an aside, one of my favorite shows, I think it's a Netflix special, is Travelers.
Okay.
They've done just two seasons, and it's a phenomenal show. It's about basically people from the future time traveling back and taking over the bodies of individuals who are going to die anyway to try to manipulate current events so they can change the future trajectory of mankind. So that's kind of the basic plot line, and they get educated as to what they're supposed to know as citizens of modern day. And like every once in a while, I think maybe a couple of times when one of the travelers has come back and, you know, they didn't get an update on education, or sometimes they were supposed to go back to a different time point.
Okay. And
something changed last minute in the future. So they were sent to the current day, but they have the slang from like 20 or 30 years ago. So they're saying stuff like, man, that's so rad. And the main characters are like, no, you don't. That was an 80s term. You don't use that here anymore. It's like, oh, shit, I need an update. So it's really funny. So rad, fresh. Those sorts of things. I'd like to wander through the day and like just use those terms and see what if people would just blow you off, or if they'd actually give you like an eyebrow, like, why are you saying that word?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
You know what I worked back in?
Anyway.
And I think it works is back then, like with the word radical and awesome. Awesome's kind of stayed. You know, you can still say awesome. But
I say awesome a lot.
But back then, another word was gnarly.
Gnarly, yeah.
And I use that today, you know.
Term.
Look at that. Look at Branch
works.
Warren's muscle. Looks gnarly, you know. Or at least I said that 10 years ago, you know.
Yeah, gnarly still works. Gnarly has not gone out.
Yeah. Repurposed for bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the more kind of truly hardcore the term.
Yeah.
Like fresh it's not very hardcore, but gnarly. That's it. You can keep using that one. Wicked. I still like Wicked.
Wicked is good.
Wicked. I like Wicked. Yeah. Yeah, Wicked's good.
Well, besides breaking down what's cool in all the language that you guys want to use at home, we also cover a bunch of bodybuilding stuff here. Dr. Scott, you've been I'm saying this for the people who may not have listened before. You have been basically dedicated to understanding our sport, our lifestyle, bodybuilding, the act of for basically your entire life. And for the listeners at home, this guy comes on and he helps to share some of his thoughts to not necessarily feed you the answers, but get you thinking about how to answer them yourself. That's what I really appreciate about you, man. And I got to ask you about California, because we have not spoke. We did speak since you've done the recording. But tell me, what were you out there doing?
So the Mind Pump podcast, and I have to once again thank you for encouraging me to do this. I knew about the podcast, but I didn't know quite how large it was, how popular it was. Was one that John Meadows did. I think you guys covered it on the Bodybuilding Nerds radio.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was maybe a couple months ago. John actually called me from the airport on his way home. He was real excited.
Yeah.
And the podcast went off really well. And so he put in the seed of thought into their heads that they should have me out. So I got contacted. You confirmed it was a good idea to do that. So I flew out there about a week ago or so. Actually, it was just 6 days ago when I did the podcast.
Okay.
So I flew out on a Monday. And these guys have Adam, Sal, and Justin do the podcast. They have a phenomenal podcast. They've had a lot of pretty big names on there. Very, very cool guys. I liked them a lot. I knew I would just listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
Because they're smart. They're down to earth. They've been doing this stuff for a while. They're really, really curious. Very personable. And so I just went in on a Tuesday, and we recorded for like a couple hours. It was funny because when I went in there, and I thought this was probably the case, but one of the things they said, and they weren't blowing smoke as far as I could tell, was that maybe of all the guests that they've had on their podcast, they thought that I was kind of the best match for the general vibe and kind of themes and things that they cover.
Interesting. I could see that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So that was obviously reassuring, that I wasn't like completely outside their normal box. So we had actually planned to talk more about biological interindividuality. They gave me a pretty long intake form that I filled out online, which I was pretty impressed by. They wanted to know all about my bio, topics I'd want to cover in some detail, actually. And we didn't end up doing that. We just they had some other thoughts in mind, and I don't want to spoil the surprise. But we actually went into Chinese medicine a good bit.
Really,
sort of they just wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah.
But I think they're looking for unique angles on things.
Absolutely. That's definitely unique.
Right. I don't know. I don't even remember who it was. I think it was a woman. Most acupuncturists, at least Americans, are women. I think it was a woman who was a competitor, maybe, that I remember seeing at some point in time, in years past. But it's very, very unusual to see a woman competitor. Actually, a lot of acupuncturists are not even athletes. I was just helping someone literally just this morning. I was helping someone online who had an issue, and she's an endurance athlete. And I said, if you could find an acupuncturist, she found one who's a triathlete, which was very unusual. There was no one in my acupuncture class, my cohort, who lifted or did any really was particularly athletic at all. I had 12 people in my class. There was one woman who was a couple years ahead of me there for a while, and she lifted weights, kind of did some CrossFit kind of stuff before CrossFit really existed.
Okay.
But they used to give me shit because it's a really, as I say all the time, it's an unnatural act. It doesn't really help with chi flow in the Chinese medical paradigm to just pick things up and put them down repeatedly. You're creating, as I called it on the show a good bit, and I called it here, a kind of a muscular callus. You're trying to kind of force an adaptation onto the body that it wouldn't normally naturally have, and one that is very specific to an odd movement pattern that is repetitive and unnatural in nature. It's like you're trying to get the body to do something it wouldn't normally do in most cases, unless you're just someone who's really highly genetically predisposed to do that. So they would give me shit. All my instructors, they would tell me that you're messing up your chi, or you should do more qigong. They weren't in favor of it all. I used to get crap every day.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it was somewhat serious, but they recognized that's where my passion was too.
Yeah,
and they were all for that. Yeah. So, and I would give them shit because most of these guys the ones who were giving me shit were men who were martial artists. And I'm like, I beat myself up. You guys beat each other up. I don't see what there's too much difference there,
Right.
Really down to at least I'm not harming anyone else. And, we'd laugh back and forth,
Yeah.
So we went into that, like, what brought me to be both a Western scientist and someone who is also trained in kind of a woo-woo alternative medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. We never actually talk anything about acupuncture here. I do think we have definitely gone into some of the more mental sides of the Eastern philosophies that you carry with you, the way that you live your life and stuff. But yeah, we've never actually talked about acupuncture here, I don't think.
Yeah, one of the things I literally just have to be careful is you can't do like telemedicine as an acupuncturist. In fact, there was a ruling here in Florida specifically where someone was wanting to practice Chinese medicine and treat a client that was out of state. And I remember I actually read the case when it went before the acupuncture board.
Okay.
You can look at a tongue and pulse diagnoses are sort of the mainstays of Chinese medicine. You're almost kind of required to do those when you're documenting your treatments, unless you particularly specialize in some other form of diagnosis, which some people do. But that's just real typical basic stuff. If someone were to call you, it's like, where's your tongue and pulse? But you can't feel a pulse.
Oh, go ahead. I'll come back to my question.
No, that's it. What do you mean by tongue and pulse?
Yeah, what do you mean? Yeah,
you look at the tongue.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. What are you seeing?
You look all sorts of things. So there's an organ map on the tongue. The homunculus on the tongue for the organs, the energetic organs. I know
that word. Homunculus.
Homunculus. Yeah. Homunculus was my online name, even an aberration of the word homunculus.
That sounded familiar.
So yeah, for those who don't know, homunculus is basically a miniature mapping on the body that represents the whole body in some way, shape, or form. So, it's all, you can Google the term. The homunculus is the idea that there's like we begin as a small version of a human that then grows into a larger version of its fully formed self in some way. So
wow.
I played off that term when I came up with my screen name online years ago, because I wanted to pick something that no one else would have. And so I called it homunculus, the idea that I'm like a miniature version of me now, and I'm going to grow as a bodybuilder and become a larger version. That was what was in my head when I came up with that name. So like people who do foot reflexology, there's a homunculus, basically a map on the foot. So they rub on one part to affect one part of your body. Chinese medicine, actually, the auricular acupuncture, where you needle the ear, there's a homunculus there that covers the whole body. It actually is the homunculus, the map there is of an inverted upside down fetus, and one of the germinal layers that becomes the auricle of the ear, the outer ear, actually also becomes the nervous system in a fully formed adult human. So there's sort of an embryological developmental connection between the tissue in the womb that becomes the ear and that which becomes the nervous system, which gives you some sort of basic biological connection for why it would make sense that you can needle the ear and you could then affect the body. And like there's I'd tell people little cool things like the point, like right in the middle of the earlobe where you put, most people put earrings, like you're kind of standing right in the middle. That's where the head is, that on the homunculus for the ear.
Really?
The map. And that's where the eye is. So pirates needed to be able to see across the sea,
Yeah.
Because long distance vision was super important for them, and that's one of the reasons that they would say, well, that's pirates kind of figured out that having those big earrings.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because these were guys who liked women's earrings. They were basically, they learned empirically that if they had that there, it was helpful for them in terms of their vision.
I'll be damned.
Like, kind of what that's just like, it's a little tidbitty type of thing. But so back to the tongue, there's an organ map on the tongue. Like the tip of the tongue represents the heart. There's representations for the liver, like on the sides, and the stomach, and the spleen, and the kidneys. And you look at the moisture of the tongue, the coat of the tongue.
Huh.
So, I mean, if you look, it's crazy. If you look at acupuncture books, you can see pictures of the tongue, and you don't normally notice this, but tongues are so highly variable in shape, coat.
Huh.
Some of them, they can be, the tongue can be thin. It can be flaccid. It can be flabby. You can have teeth marks on the sides.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes because tongue is a little swollen. People are like looking at their tongue in the mirror if they're in the bathroom or in their car. Don't wreck your car looking in your rearview mirror at your tongue. You're driving right now. But so there's just a plethora of information that can come from looking at the tongue. In Chinese medicine, they just figured out empirically, and this of course happened over centuries.
Yeah.
In various lineages of acupuncture shamans and acupuncturists. Figuring out that the tongue, what's going on in the tongue corresponds with other symptoms going on in the body, and they corroborated all those things together to build the paradigm that is Chinese medicine.
Wow.
So purely empirical, like there are connections that I could run through some of the ones that I know of that match with Western medicine, like referred pain, those sorts of things, where you feel pain one place and it refers to an actual organ, and sometimes those places where you're feeling the pain is on the channel for the organ that in Chinese medicine they correspond. So there's the tongue, and then you feel the pulse. So there's the radial pulse on the wrist. You feel it on both sides, and there are different systems there that people employ for feeling the pulse at 3 different positions and at different depths. That corresponds to the yang and the yin organs of the body. And pulse diagnosis is just like, I always kept that really simple. People, I think, I have the sense that some people go way overboard with that, but it's one of those things where I think almost each practitioner would sort of figure it out on their own, because there's different systems and they sometimes contradict. That's probably, it could be a pretty woo-woo thing in many cases, but if someone has like devoted a life, and literally that's how it's even known, so you devote your life to figuring out how to do good pulse diagnosis. You will learn in what you feel in the pulse that corresponds to what you're seeing in your patients. And there can be some things learned from that. And you can needle things and feel changes in the pulse. And so a pulse can feel like a wire coming up. It can be soft. It can be thin. There's all sorts of terms for the pulse that literally take years and years to figure out. So you need to feel the pulses in Chinese medicine sort of legally to be able to practice it. So you can't do the real diagnostic techniques that you need to do if you're going to really do Chinese medicine with someone who lives, somewhere other than where you are, where you can't see them in person.
Right. So
that's why I don't go into the Chinese medicine so much, because you're kind of just pissing in the wind. Same as when someone messages you on Facebook or, asks questions like, hey, so this is what I've got going on. I got pain in my shoulder. It's like, okay, well, you can't do an orthopedic or neurologic exam on their shoulder if, they live in Timbuktu.
Yeah.
So you don't know if it's a rotator cuff. They may have a torn labrum. It might be bicipital impingement. That there's a whole bunch of things that could be. You can kind of guess, but then the more you try to do that, you're trying to diagnose someone, and then if you do have a medical license, you could be messing yourself up, because you're not doing things properly. You're like trying to give someone a diet when you haven't asked them about like what foods they might be allergic to, what foods up the stomach, what they're currently eating. You just give them like the cookie cutter diet. That's really kind of irresponsible. Really, you give them a diet that's 2,000 calories and they're eating 3,500 calories at the time. It's like, because you just figured out though they need to eat 12 calories per pound of body weight. Yeah. Well, they didn't know to go down that 1,500 calories. You could have dropped them to 3,100 or 3,200 calories and got the fat loss you're looking for. Yeah. But you didn't do an intake. You didn't do a diagnosis, so to speak, of their nutritional status, of their diet, what they're currently doing. And that's the same thing that holds for Chinese medicine. So I don't dive into it too much, because there's just not too much you can do, at least in my opinion, because you can't.
I get it. Yeah.
With people.
Yeah, no, I just thought of that though. Like I thought, hey, this is something we hadn't talked about. Since you guys do talk a little bit more about the Eastern stuff, I'm going to look forward to hearing about that when the Mind Pump episode comes out, as well as everything else, man. I'm pumped about it.
I'll tell you this though, Scott, the thing about this is the thing that I learned as much as anything from Chinese medicine, the intakes that there's the classical quote unquote 10 questions. You go through basically all the systems of the body and you ask questions pertaining, like, you women, especially, you dive way in. You can spend a half an hour easily with a woman that really doesn't even have a sense that she's having any menstrual or female related issues, just because so much can be gleaned there. So it's helped me so much working as a coach and with clients, because there's so much detail that you can get if you really just keep asking and keep learning. And people miss that. That's not like the standard we don't have a quote unquote standard in the bodybuilding coaching industry as of yet.
Yeah.
So unlike, where there's medical licenses. So it helped me a lot because you just, the more you dig, the more you'll know, and the better you'll be able to serve the person you're trying to help. So anyway, I want to put that in. Yeah. Cause that's the bottom line thing that I learned from Chinese medicine.
That makes sense. Totally. Before we went to our break, though, there was one thing I wanted to mention. Now, it's something you and I just talked about very briefly. I didn't see this. I believe that he had messaged it to me as well. But you had brought up the Schoenfeld study that had just come out, and we started talking about it. But then I said, well, let's just tell me about it on the show. I've been away from social media for the most part for a few days here. So catch us up a little bit. What did he come out with?
A new meta-analysis at Schoenfeld with James Krieger, who's the statistician he works with, and Jozo Grgic. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name properly, but I think he's worked with him previously too.
Okay.
So they had, I'll look it up here because I have it sitting in front of me. The initial meta-analysis that was done, just published like 2 or 3 years ago, they found a greater effect size for training 2 times a week versus 3 times a week, or versus 1 time a week. But there wasn't enough data to say that 3 or more times a week was beneficial.
Okay.
They just had 7 studies with a total of about 200 subjects. Now, in just the last few years, obviously it's been kind of a hot topic. There are 25 studies that they included in this new meta-analysis that just came out with more than 800 subjects. So they had a little more data to go on, and they found, when they looked at, they were able to kind of divvy things up into volume equated studies, where the 2 groups split the volume out into over the course of the different training sessions. So if you compared, 10 sets 1 times a week, you would compare that with 5 sets twice a week, same number of total working sets. And interestingly, Brad actually has a study comparing 1 versus 3 times per week, showing advantages for 3 times a week, one of his own studies. But in this particular meta-analysis, when they put together statistically the information that have come out so far, they found no effect of training frequency in those studies when training volume was equated. So if they kept the volume the same, comparing 1 versus 2 versus 3 or more times per week, training more often did not matter in what they found. They had 10 studies that looked at individuals with previous training experience, and they didn't find anything when they did a subgroup analysis. There was no evidence that training status mattered either. So trained or untrained, if you equate the volume for what they found, training frequency didn't matter. If they looked at the studies where the training volume was not equated, there actually was a modest effect size difference in favor of higher frequency training.
Okay.
And it was just an effect size. If I have to go and look, the bottom line from what I read was that there was an effect of higher frequency of training, but it wasn't a stepwise effect, 1 versus 2 versus 3, like 2 better than 1, 3 better than 2, 3 or more better than, or more than 3 versus 3. It was basically that more frequency overall, statistically speaking, is beneficial when they're not controlling for volume. And what that points to is that higher training frequencies allow you to include more training volume, which is what they will do in these studies. So there's one study, for instance, where they compared the same number of sets 1 time a week versus the same number of sets 3 times a week, so triple the volume. And that particular study was one published in German that it was a real nicely done study from several years ago. There was an effect of frequency, but there also was an effect of volume because they didn't equate the volume. So that frequently is a way to include more volume. And the more volume you can do, and this is the findings of one of his previous meta-analyses, one of Brad's previous ones with James Krieger, is that more volume, to some degree, will create more muscle growth. And that makes sense. And that's going to vary for everyone, at least in my, it's funny if you look across training studies, there's a gigantic variability in the relative rate of muscle growth. So how much muscle growth you get per week. Some of that's because the duration of the study, the rate of muscle growth will change over time. It tends to slow down. Ceiling effect. And some of it's just because, different, even with the same number of training sessions per week, you've got different training protocols and you've got different subjects, you've got different experimenters, some of whom are probably more or less motivating. So there's just tremendous variability all over the place. Yeah. But the interesting thing that they got was that training with higher frequencies, when you don't equate for volume, was advantageous, generally speaking. And the thing that kind of that's pointed to there, and I don't think I know they don't use this term, but this brings up the notion of junk volume. Okay. So if you're someone who goes in, let's say you train, chest once a week, and you can use the good old Lee Haney's stimulate, don't annihilate saying. And 20 sets, like all out, is more than you need. Like beyond 10 sets, maybe for someone, all it is junk volume. Sure. Either it's excessive, in that you may be actually slowing adaptation because you're doing too much. You're creating so much of an inroad into recovery and so much damage that you've basically superseded your recovery abilities and your muscle protein synthesis abilities. Right. So that you are just taking care of repairing the damaged muscle, and you don't do a very good job of actually adding more contractile protein, which is what you want. Or you're just doing you do the first 3 or 4 exercises, you train hard, and then you're just like wiped out, and it's just shitty training, and you're just doing junk. So that's like the 1 time a week idea. Okay. Whereas, and those are 20 sets. Whereas you might be able to, let's just leave it at that. So maybe you could go in and train 3 times a week. How many times? And do 3 times. 3 times. I'm just creating a scenario. Yeah. 3 times a week, and you might be able to do. That's 24 sets. Okay. And recover from those. Let's say.
24 sets total for a week. For the week, split over 3 times.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a case where you trained 3 times a week, and you're able to incorporate a little more volume. Or let's just go to this. Let's say someone does actually do 10 sets once a week, and they get some growth from that. And now you're going to just increase frequency and optimize the volume that you can use each training session and recover from. Okay. So you make that 5 sets each of 3. This is a more practical and reasonable way to do it in my mind than the first scenario. The first scenario was someone's doing junk volume with 20 sets. That's just too much. So there's an error right there in programming because you're trying to do too much in a given workout. It's not an optimal way, even training 1 time a week. But let's say someone does 10 and they can recover and make good progress. If they try to do 12 or 14, then they're just doing junk volume, or they're past the optimal growth that they can get because it's just too much in one session. So like this hormesis curve, you've got some dose response curve that the higher the dose of training, the better, until you get to some optimal peak. And then beyond that, more sets do not help. They actually are detrimental. So let's say 10 sets for a 1 time a week scenario is optimal in the 1 time a week scenario. But you could train 3 times a week and do 5 sets. So that's 15 sets a week. And you can recover from 5 sets and be able to train again and recover again 2 days later, like on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday regime.
Sure. That feels more like what I've been doing.
Exactly. So that's kind of what this meta-analysis is sort of pointing to. There's some limitations there. Most of the studies that didn't equate volume were studying untrained older adults.
Yeah.
So we're still missing out on the main thing that people want to look at. You still look at, so who did they include in meta-analysis? What the subjects being studied? Only 10 of the 25 are with trained individuals. They didn't find any difference there for anything, trained versus untrained. And where they did find some effect of frequency, it was mainly with untrained older adults, and older folks don't recover quite as well.
Yeah.
And they mentioned this, which I was glad to read, that this effect that I just outlined there in that 10 sets once a week versus 5 sets 3 times a week might even be greater. They didn't have the data to support this idea, but they sort of speculated that it might even be more so applicable to younger folks who can adapt more readily than older folks can. So they're not going to need 3 or 4 days to adapt. They can spring back and train again 2 days later on like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday type of regime.
I like that.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. So the frequency per se, when volume was equated, didn't matter. 15 of the 25 were with untrained individuals. You can have a ceiling effect there, where people are growing so fast. Yeah. It doesn't really matter so much. You can only put on muscle so rapidly. So, whereas, 2 or 3 times a week might be better in the long run, perhaps. You're not going to know that from those studies. So 15 of the 25 studies were with untrained folks. That doesn't matter whether you train 1 or 3 times a week from what they're finding. On average, for some people you do, in some studies you do, in some studies you don't. So, but on average, in the meta-analysis, the broad scheme of things, you don't find that to be the case. But you're always going to find individuals, and they're going to find studies, like Brad's, for instance, where the higher frequency training does seem to be helpful. But it totally makes sense that untrained people wouldn't necessarily benefit from that, because they're just growing from everything.
Yeah.
You're growing as fast as you're going to grow when you're just starting.
Yeah.
So, you're moving at max growth rate, pretty much initially. So the finer nuances and advantages of higher frequency, if there are any, aren't going to show themselves in the rate of growth.
Yeah.
Because you're already at max. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So very interesting meta-analysis. It's cool. I was like, I didn't know that many studies had come out. I've got like probably 8 or 10 that I've downloaded and bookmarked and included, made note of, because I'll include the next version of Fortitude training. But they added, they went from 7 to 25 in just the last 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's a shitload of studies.
I'll find this link too. So the link that we were just talking about, I'll find that and I'll put it in the show notes so that anybody else who hasn't seen it gets a chance to.
Yeah, I'll send you the reference.
All right, thanks.
With the URL for it. Yeah. I had to buy the study.
Oh,
I had to be able to read the thing.
Oh, okay. Can you read the abstract at least?
Yeah, you can read the abstract. I mean, it won't tell you some of the things. I just told you the bottom.
Gotcha. But still,
line things. Abstract,
we can make it available for
overview. But
who knows? Our listeners might want to check it out. They may want to pay for it too.
I think it was $45.
Yeah. Well, who knows, man? That's a little rich for my blood, but we got some listeners out there that are they're listening to you, man. They want to dig into this stuff.
Yeah, those things eventually they will come out, but it could be years from now.
Okay.
Sometimes they come out. This is like, it's a business. investment for me. I mean, for one of those, I think I probably bought for the presentations that I did in Columbus. I probably bought 15 studies.
No kidding.
I may have bought maybe like 10, maybe not that many. It took me several weeks, but I probably bought 10. So I spent $300 or $400 just on buying, because I'm going to read them. I'm not going to just read the abstracts. That doesn't really tell you anything. That doesn't give you the insights.
Yeah.
That just gives you one person, that gives you the author's best impressions in 200 or 300 words of what they found, but it doesn't tell you the holes in the ship. It's like, here's it's like a picture of the car, and it's a truck, and it's a 4x4, and it gets this many miles per gallon. Yeah. And it's red. It's like, okay, so how does it do on the hill? Yeah, right. It doesn't tell you any of the important finer details of that you want to know. Like, okay, like the number of trained versus untrained. Yeah. Trained versus untrained people, or that very important point that most of those studies where they didn't control for volume were with untrained older folks. Yeah. So I mean that doesn't apply to most of the people are the opposite of that. They're trained and they're younger, right? Who are listening to this and thinking about this. So you just read that abstract and you just think, oh well, there's no effective frequency. Yeah. And they just need more volume. But the authors themselves say that effect of being able to include more volume when you can train with a higher frequency might be even more applicable to younger individuals who have greater recovery abilities is a very important point, because that's pointing to the idea that higher frequency does potentially have an advantage, because you can train more and get away with it, and recovery is the name of the game. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's exactly why, this is really the reason why I have 3 different volume tiers in fortitude training. Because recovery is what you want to be able to do. And it varies by person. Some people can use volume tier 1, some people 2, some people 3. Yeah. I have different frequencies in there too, the 2 versions of the program. But so that's I think can be the key. Like example, speaking of John said numerous times, he just trains calves all the time, every workout, unless his feet are starting to hurt him. Okay. That's how he, for many years in the past, unless he's starting to feel like he's, getting a little plantar fasciitis type of thing flaring up. So that could be, I don't know how many sets he does, but he's doing that, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. Let's say he does 5 sets. That's a heck of a lot different. Let's say he just does 4 sets, 5 times those 20 sets. It's a heck of a lot different than doing 20 sets 1 time a week.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah, and he would, and that's also the thing, is that his training intensity, the quality of those sets wouldn't be nearly as high. The nature of them would be different. He can do 4 sets, and they can be pretty heavy and pretty hard, and then he's done. Whereas, if he does, by the time he gets to that 16th set of calves, it's like, I just want to get the hell out of here. So, even John, is like, okay, I got 2 more sets. Can't wait to be done with calves. It's junk volume to some degree. He wouldn't do that. He would know better than to try to do 20 sets of calves 1 time a week. So that's the advantage, is that you can include more high quality training that you can recover from with a higher frequency regime. At least what this is the main thing this meta-analysis is pointing to. So cool study.
Nice. Well, thanks for helping us understand it a little bit more. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Listen, let's get to a break, because we're good half hour in, and we have some questions from the forum. We've still been working through them. Let's hit a quick break and come back and cover all that stuff. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, guys, we'll be back in just a second. Hey guys, if you appreciate the stuff that Dr. Scott's been sharing here with us on Muscle Minds, then there is so much more for you to explore. First of all, check out his training plan. It's over at fortitudetraining.net. You can download the ebook there. You also get a subscription to his message board where he answers questions daily. And definitely check out his new book. You can get it hardcover at Amazon, or if you're international, through Barnes & Noble. It's called Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. If you want to get the ebook, you can get that at byobbcoach.com. I personally went through Amazon and I got the hardcover. It's a little bit more, but they make these things print on demand, and really, it's a lot cheaper than hiring somebody else. You could learn everything you need in this book to run your whole year. He'll help you understand how to start from planning to carrying out an off-season and through your contest prep. Plus, it's a sharp-looking book. I put it on my coffee table, and then when girls come over, it looks like I'm smart and like I read stuff. So there's that too. Guys, check out more from Dr. Scott. And while you're out there clicking on the webs and stuff, you can check out our sponsor, which is True Nutrition. It's TrueNutrition.com. They offer a wide variety of all sorts of supplements, but especially proteins. You can get basically like every type of protein under the sun exists, from your basic whey isolates, which are very high quality, and that's a whey isolate that I've used for all of my contest preps and suggest to my clients. Been using them for years, since back when they were called True Protein. You can get stuff like that. You can get some weird stuff too. Like they have a cricket protein last time I looked. I don't use the cricket protein. I don't plan on using the cricket protein, but it is there. I also use a bunch of their intra-workout stuff, their carbs, and I mix together the concoctions that I want to do. You could also buy like a prefabbed intra, like the MPA or the Mountain Dog intra workouts that are available there, and a whole bunch more stuff. So go check them out, explore, and use our code ADVICES at checkout. You'll get some savings, and you'll support our programs by doing so. Thanks, guys. Let's get back to Dr. Scott. All right, guys, and we are back. Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson. We've got a question here. It says, good day from Australia. Love the show, fellas. A question for Scott. I like to be ambiguous. He says, question from Scott. I like to be ambiguous. That's so he just says Scott. I think he's talking about you. That's what I'm guessing. But I don't know. Maybe he says,
is he calling me ambiguous?
What? Does he what?
Is he calling me ambiguous? What do you mean?
Yes. Could you please discuss blood work in regards to high? Now I'm scared to say this word because I was not pronouncing exactly right. You say it now because I'm scared to say it. I'm going to say creatine is what I'm going to say.
Creatinine. Is different than creatine.
Little bit.
Yeah, creatinine and creatine are different. Different molecules.
Oh.
Very related. That will be part of my answer, actually.
Levels in its accuracy in determining true potential kidney impairment, etc. I'm 34 years old. I've been using anabolics very, very mildly for only 3 years and not for long periods. I decided to get my blood done, and creatinine came back at 124 in my range here in Australia, recommending 60 to 110. Could this be artificially raised due to protein intake or anything else, or should I be getting my kidneys checked out? Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Scott.
So ambiguous. Is he thinking first? That's what I want to know.
I don't know, man.
God damn, man.
So confused.
These ambiguous Australians. So yeah, this is a question I wanted to answer because it's it gets asked all the time. It's been getting asked for years and years and years. So it's a very common one, but obviously kidney health is super duper important. So it's worth covering. So creatine, like the creatine monohydrate, the stuff we'll supplement with the stuff that's found in meat, stuff that's found predominantly in muscle tissue. It's also in nervous tissue. It's a high phosphate donor for creatine phosphate to ATP for rapid ATP synthesis during high intensity exercise, et cetera, et cetera. People know all about creatine phosphate. Creatine will spontaneously degrade to creatinine. I think it's like about a 1 to 2% degradation rate per day.
Okay.
So your body makes that endogenously, or you can supplement with it. So most of the creatine in your body is stored in skeletal muscle mass. And in years past, before we had things like DEXA or ultrasound, or before biopsies were being done to measure muscle size or changes in muscle fiber size, actually just as kind of a rough estimate of muscle mass, creatinine levels would be measured. Because the more muscle you have, the more creatine you have, the higher your blood creatinine levels will be.
Okay.
So literally, it's kind of like using body mass index as an index of obesity. Generally, people with a higher BMI are going to have more body fat. And it's actually a great analogy for the people who are listening here. But obviously, most of the people listening, if they've done a good job in bodybuilding or they're good bodybuilders, are going to have a high BMI, but they're not obese.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you've done a good job bodybuilding, you've got a lot of muscle mass, you're going to have a lot of creatine in your body. And the spontaneously degrading creatine to creatinine is going to be giving you higher blood creatinine levels simply because you have more muscle. Yeah. And that's literally what it would measure, the estimate of muscle mass. So that creatinine is filtered in your kidneys and the glomerulus. And the measurement you'll see when you do blood work is an eGFR, an estimated glomerular filtration rate. And that is an estimate, a calculation, based on blood creatinine levels. So you'll see he's giving his creatinine levels at 124, the range being 60 to 110. And that would indicate, if his kidneys are doing, for some people, someone that had average muscle mass, just like high BMI would indicate, for someone with average muscle mass, they got more body fat on average. A high creatinine level would, for someone who has normal muscle mass, would suggest that their body is not doing a very good job, their kidneys are not doing a very good job of filtering out that creatinine, so it's backing up.
Okay.
It's like a drain that doesn't empty very well. Yeah. So you have that backs up into the drain. So you have higher blood creatinine levels. But if you have more muscle mass, you can also have higher blood creatinine levels. So I just got a message from someone. I get this message, or I see a thread like this literally every 2 or 3 months, if not even more frequently, on the message boards, always being asked. People are wondering. So if I see someone who's like, I'm a 260-pound bodybuilder, I'm like 9% body fat, and my blood creatinine levels are 140 or 150, and I've been big for 15 years and they stayed the same. My guess is it's possible. I'm not making a diagnosis based on it. My guess is probably that your higher creatinine levels are because you have more muscle mass.
Yeah.
So if creatinine is changing and your muscle mass isn't substantially changing, that suggests something's changing in your kidney function. You're not doing a good job of filtering.
Yeah.
So your eGFR is getting poor. So the other thing that can happen too, and there's some possibility, I don't know exactly how they're measuring creatinine nowadays. There's different ways these things can be measured, but creatine can potentially interfere with the measurement of creatinine because the molecules are obviously very similar. So you don't want to go in for your blood work, take your morning dose of creatine and go in for your blood work.
Yeah.
Because they'll elevate the blood levels for like 5 hours or so. Several hours. So that's not a good thing to do. Don't take a morning dose of creatine. It's supposed to be fasted anyway. I've had clients do that. They didn't want to miss a meal, but they had to for their blood work. So at least they took all their supplements.
Yeah.
And, so they took their B12 and those sorts of things. Everything's all kind of out of whack. So you want to be truly fasted, not have anything in your system if all possible. So that's not good. But if you're creatine loaded and you've actually really loaded with creatine, then guess what? You've increased your muscle creatine levels. You're going to increase. Then you have more creatinine being formed from spontaneous degradation from creatine to creatinine, and you're going to have higher creatinine levels. So you could see a jump if you're someone who loads really well on creatine. You might increase your muscle creatine levels by 20 or 30% even. Vegetarians can get even higher changes.
Really?
And that would work. Yeah. Vegetarians who haven't been eating any meat. There's an old, I did both my master's thesis and my PhD on creatine supplementation, so I knew the literature pretty well at one point.
Okay.
One of the older studies, one of the first ones, they supplemented, there was a sprinter who was a vegetarian who was the super responder to creatine. And he or she was running a 100-meter dash, in like 10.9, and it dropped to like 10.3 or something like that.
Wow.
From creatine supplementation. Yeah, it was like, whoa, holy shit. And that makes sense if you think about the extent to which you'll increase creatine phosphate, and that being the most rapid way to replenish ATP for muscular contraction. It actually worked out sort of mathematically that they would be able to maintain that highest peak speed during a 100-meter dash.
Yeah.
It made sense. It was like just phenomenal performance enhancement for that particular person. I'm sure was pretty happy. So if you're loaded with creatine, you're going to tend to have higher creatinine levels as well. So the best answer that I know to this, and always talk to your doctor, of course, first, but you can look at cystatin C as a measurement. That's just another metabolite that is going to be involved, filtered kind of in the same way. So if levels change, it reflects failure to filter properly by the kidney.
Okay.
And it's not going to be a muscle mass as well.
It's not what?
So it's not going to be a functional muscle mass like creatine is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can use that, and it doesn't doesn't fall prey to the same source of a false positive.
Okay.
Meaning, having more muscle mass and more creatine, thus more creatinine, is going to give you could give you a false positive. If your kidneys are plenty healthy, you just have higher. It's an estimate. Oh, the other thing that's interesting is you'll see most of the time on blood work that they'll have a different value for quote blacks or African Americans. Yeah. And that's because of muscle mass differences.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Huh. So yeah, that's part of the reason. Or like that's what they find statistically. When they do that, that there was a racial difference there. And so they had to use different estimation equations because there's a statistically different there's a statistical reason for using different ones for different races, and some of that's probably muscle mass related. I don't know that that's actually that's one of those taboo things where they I haven't ever seen where someone went in to say, so what's the source of the need for a different estimation equation based on race? Yeah. But it's probably a muscle mass related thing is my guess. Just looking at the basic biology of what's going on with creatinine.
Okay.
So if you're going to use EFGR and based on creatinine levels, just you want to watch and see how it's changing over time. If all of a sudden you're not like packing on like massive amounts of Rami-like muscle mass, and your EGR is going down the tubes and your creatinine's going up, then that's something to pay attention to, of course. And even if it's high, just go do the cystatin C and make sure. Okay. This person doesn't. Oh, he's just done it. He's measured it one time, and he doesn't say how big he is. He's 34, but he's probably got more muscle mass than the average person.
Yeah. So he has a profile picture. You can see his shoulder and his bicep. He definitely has more muscle mass than the average person. Okay. There's no question. Right.
He's a big cat. So there you go. I mean, that's kind of confirmation that you're outside the norm. Good. Yeah. I still would. I'm still not giving you medical advice, but
right.
Yeah, he's got some better understanding now what the test is measuring at least.
So if he got this tested recently or whatever at the time of this post, how long would you say is a good time to wait before you would do a follow-up and begin creating that track record where you can start watching the progress?
Well, that would be dependent upon whenever he needs to get his blood work done in general.
Okay. But I guess I'm asking, all things aside, and then this could be applied to, I guess, just general blood work questions. Mm-hmm. If he's thinking like, okay, I'm not going to really freak out about this at the moment, but I would like to follow up with like 3 months or 6 months, or and I know you can't give me an actual answer, but if you were in that position, you had no other reasons to go in and get labs done. How long would be a good time to wait to be able to gauge whether this is consistent, stable, or, would that be 3 months?
If I were him, I would just go and get a cystatin C measurement done and get creatinine done as well.
Okay.
The same lab. Yeah. And then see, okay, good. My creatinine came back at, 126, basically the same thing. And my cystatin C is dead normal.
And then he would know, huh?
And then he has, okay, I think I'm good. That would for me, I would think, okay, I'm not too worried about my creatinine being high and my EGFR based on creatinine being off because the cystatin C is good. Now, if he goes in and cystatin C is high, then, that could be an issue. But, yeah, so whatever, but to kind of get to the point I think you're driving towards with your question is it depends on the thing, whatever he may be doing. Everyone, is different, has different levels of health consciousness. So, but if he decides he's been doing mild cycling, and he decides, whatever, he's going to just go for it, and he just like throws the kitchen sink at himself, and his blood pressure goes sky high. He's not feeling well, and he's got really foamy urine, and like he just like, then I would. It's nice to get blood work while you're on to see how off your system is, and then. When he feels like he's healthy again, give himself a month or so of back on TRT or PCT or whatever he happens to be doing, and then check it.
Okay.
When he should be healthy.
Okay.
Along with his blood pressure, the things that could be influencing his kidney health.
I just wondered because I mentioned I think one time here before that I know I mentioned on Blood, Sweat, and Gear one time that there's a lot of I think people that, in the past, like a decade ago, nobody did blood work. And then I've known people that don't really seem to have any reason to do it, but they're still doing it like every month, basically. And I feel like there's been some overkill at the same time when then I've heard like John Meadows say like, well, and he's not pushing anything really hard now, but he was like, I get it done twice a year.
Mm-hmm. That's a great frequency. I think that, if you're doing, enhanced bodybuilding, definitely makes, bodybuilding in and of itself, just like dieting down.
Yeah.
If you're natural, it's friggin' harsh. You're putting yourself into basically starvation, situations, and you're pushing, it's massive amount of stress. Really.
Yeah.
Just dieting down. You feel like shit, and you're forcing yourself to do like heavy squats and deadlifts because you want to keep your muscle mass, and like you're getting dizzy during the day, and the natural guys all pretty much go hypogonadal.
Yeah.
Sex drive is on, like everything's really fucked up. It's pretty stressful stuff. Makes sense to get some blood work done, just to see, who knows, what you may have done to yourself.
Yeah.
So just as far as like hormonally for those guys, but twice a year definitely makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the first, and I've talked about this once before, a couple times before, the first time that I had gotten my lab work done, it was with a doctor who I don't think he really had much of an understanding, and I hadn't been using anything, but he told me like, oh, your kidneys are going to shut down, like you're above range. And, he tried to scare me. And, then when I talked to the nurse after, she was like, no, really, these numbers are fine. And this is what I would expect from you. And so I'm glad we can talk about this because I've heard other people get also scared, for really no good reason. But then at the other side of the coin, I guess I've seen people get hurt too. I knew a guy who had higher levels, and, it turned out he wasn't ever using an AI. He was using a diuretic through the summer. He would cycle in the summer and the winter. In the summertime to stay drier, he would use a diuretic every day. And
I think you mentioned this before.
I think he has like 30% of his kidneys left now after he finally went in and got some testing done.
Yeah. Western doctors, there's phenomenal doctors, and there's some that just are probably overworked. They start off with good intentions.
Yeah.
Some are just money doctors or what have you. But if a doctor, if you go in and like, if someone in this situation and they ask the doctor and it says, no, you're destroying your kidneys. Look how high this is. You're out of range. And if someone were to bring up, my understanding is that creatinine is reflective of creatine levels, which would be higher in people with more muscle mass.
Yeah.
That might explain part of the elevation we're seeing here. And if they just say, no, there's no possibility, or they just blow that off, which sometimes they will, I would suggest getting a second opinion.
Yeah.
You want a doctor who has some deeper understanding of the underlying basis of the tests.
Yeah.
There was a friend of mine years ago. This is one of my most kind of direct stories related to this, who she actually wanted me to go in with her to her OBGYN just to help her translate some of the stuff. She was having some issues, and she exercised every day, very, very fit, and trained really hard. And she had some elevation of ALT and AST, the basic quote unquote liver enzymes.
Okay.
And so went in and they were looking over her blood work, and that was elevated a little bit, and they're getting to that point, and and she'd been seeing this OBGYN for a little bit. My friend asked me to sort of intervene and explain and offer some opinions, now and again, and just sort of be kind of part of the process. And I said, that might be elevated because she exercises. You can get false positives from muscle damage in those two tests of liver enzymes. Yeah. I think I just said tests of liver enzymes, maybe how I mentioned. She's like, what do you mean liver enzymes? I'm like, ALT and AST, they're actually can be released from damaged skeletal muscle and elevate blood levels when it's not actually the liver that's damaged in that case. She's like, why would you think that? I'm like, because there's evidence. I said, yeah, I'll fax over the study if you like. She's like, I don't think so. I was like, okay, well, very good. I'll send it to you later on this week. She was just basically just told me like, you're full of shit. It was just like, I'm like, look, the sky is blue, and everyone I've asked around her sky. She's like, no, it's not. It's not blue. It's not blue. Just because I have to say so. Like, she was just like, no, it's not. And she was just really adamant, in the way that, and kind of egotistical in the way that doctors can be. She wanted the best for my friend. I know that, but she just didn't. I don't think she felt like it was like an attempt to be a frontal of her authority. Yeah. And I didn't say it like, well, I have knowledge that you don't.
No.
Let me explain to you why I'm superior to you. I didn't mean to say it in that way at all. I was literally trying to help figure out, because they're trying to figure out whatever health problems my friend was having. So, I didn't want them to start following down a path of maybe some liver issues because these values were elevated slightly, because there's another likely reason for that. I know how hard she's always sore, and I know how hard she trains, and it would make sense she'd have some modest elevations there. They're probably always like that. So I just gave some background information to help, say, hey, behind that door, you're going to see elevated skeletal. You're going to see skeletal muscle damage that could be elevating those enzyme levels. Yeah. Just so you know, it's not necessarily the liver in her case.
Yeah.
But she didn't take that very well at all. So I would avoid physicians. That's just kind of my thought. Physicians who aren't open to input or can't explain the underlying basis of the tests in a way that could account for things that are different about being a bodybuilder, like this test or the liver. Those are the two big ones, really. Yeah. Is that you can end up with false positives because of exercise and more muscle mass.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's an important one because hopefully people can bookmark this podcast because this one will come up again. We'll probably get a question, in the next year on the same thing.
Yeah. Refer back to episode 57. I think that's what this will be.
Exactly. Yep. Pretty much.
All right. Next question was from Kate D on the board. She says, backstory. And this is kind of a long one, bunch to read here. Backstory, my dad is 70-year-old former bodybuilder who was born with fused hips and clubbed feet, having to undergo a number of surgeries and diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at a young age. Nutrition. My dad sustained 2 near critical heart attacks, which had lent to a fear-based eating disorder. He ate very little for a period of time, dropping protein in particular, and lost a ton of weight. He bottomed out at 143 pounds, at which point my mom asked me to intervene. I got him to do a dopamine-based diet, and we've got his weight up a bit to 152, but his protein intake continues to suffer. He's not a fan of chicken breast, but brags about his 4 eggs a day because he feels like he eats like a champ. It's likely the only protein he gets. Mentally, he's top shelf. He's become reinvigorated by the bodybuilding world since seeing me compete for the first time this spring, sharing my best friend's cut this summer and fall, and sharing Olympia weekend together for his 70th birthday. he has decided that over the winter he needs to start lifting again. And I got him some mobility boards last Christmas. So together with those bands. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Bands last Christmas. So together with those, he's started lifting 3 pounds and 4 pound weights. What are some good nutritional and supplemental recommendations, including protein intake, that he could implement to maintain his gains and allow him to thrive? Thank you in advance.
Okay, so this is a big one.
It's a touching question too. It's really sweet that she's put so much thought into her dad.
Well, that I know Kate, and that absolutely matches my understanding of who she is as a person. She's a phenomenal individual. The world is blessed to have her around, I guess is one way of saying it.
I'm going to talk to her next Saturday. We're going to record a podcast together about change.
There you go. Well, then what I just said will be evidenced, I'm sure, in abundance.
Yes.
She's phenomenal. Yeah,
we spoke once before. Yeah, we talked once before on the show, and it was really awesome stuff, so I can't wait.
Yeah, she's awesome. So the first thing here is he's got an eating disorder. So, and it's like it's based on. It seems like it's still in place. If ever there's kind of a good reason to be kind of have a fear-based eating disorder, it's almost dying.
Sure.
Near critical heart attack. So he almost lost his life. So, getting as much information to him, or even like working with the counselor, it's hard, especially with someone who's in his 70s. But most counselors are going to be of a different demographic, different generation, even younger. So to find someone who he would have that sort of at least sense of being a peer with, who could understand like what his life experiences have been, what he's lived through as someone who's in his 70s. And thus could connect, and be able to talk to him about just death. He's a fear of death, and it's directing his day-to-day behavior, and see what it is that can be done there, so that he's open to eating in different sorts of ways. So that I think that's the root of it, really. I mean, you can. I could say, take this and take that and take this, but if he's scared of it, because it's an unknown, then that's not going to work. He's on the dopamine based. There's all sorts of variations in this, but it's typically dairy and unprocessed meats, omega-rich fish, eggs, fruits and veggies. It's a great balanced diet. Nuts, which there's almonds and walnuts, and sometimes deep dark chocolate. Elevate dopamine, and I think she did that. I mean, that's just a healthy diet. You're going to feel good eating that way. So that's good. I don't know how high this question is kind of old now, so I don't know how high his protein has gotten. Older folks, the general first thing that kind of pops up is that older people can suffer from what's called anabolic resistance in this muscle. There can be some assimilation issues with protein in the diet, and for a given amount of protein, they don't get the same response in myofibrillar protein synthesis. So older folks might actually need relatively more dietary protein than younger folks, just to support the adaptation to resistance exercise.
Really? Okay.
So, yeah. So it's funny. There is one. So the question, I was going to say the age-old question, that's almost too punny. The age-old question with aging and loss of strength and endurance and functional performance is whether it's a function of age per se, or if it's a function of inactivity. And it's about 50-50 split.
Okay.
From what I found. So I did a long paper on this many, many moons ago. And if you can look at it, so sort of what happens over the course of the lifetime when you analyze like epidemiologically physical activity versus loss of endurance capacity, VO2 max, or loss of strength. And about half of the loss is due to, in both cases, is due to inactivity, and half of it's just because you're getting older. And then you can reverse a good bit, just by training. So, you can take yourself back. If someone's 70, you can weight train and bring your strength levels back to what they would be if you were 40 or 50, or what the average person is. And same thing goes for endurance exercise. So you can it's the kind of the quote unquote fountain of youth. If you look at it that way, you can actually do that. So, and back to the anabolic resistance idea, there is actually one study that was very cool. So the way they'll test this in a formalized way, they'll infuse amino acids into the blood and look at the myofibrillar protein synthetic response to that amino acid exposure, and it's blunted in older folks. And so that's the anabolic resistance. They're just resistant to the anabolic effects of amino acids, essential amino acids. There's one particular study, they just had the folks do some walking, just like sort of vigorous walking, and they were doing the studies on the vastus lateralis, so there was muscles of the quad which are involved in walking, and they reversed the age-related difference in myofibrillar protein synthesis. They reversed the anabolic resistance simply by making them more active, just getting out and being active. So anyway, so that's part of what is important with to prevent aging, is just simply to be active. Activity is gigantic. So he may still need more protein, and you're probably not going to go overboard unless he's especially in his case where he's it sounds like he's pretty reticent to take in protein. So probably got in his head, because it was beat into his mind for years, that eggs increase your cholesterol and they're going to give you a heart attack. Or that red meat, and the saturated fat is the worst thing ever, and it's going to give you a heart attack. So he probably has those thoughts in his head, because this is a fear-based eating disorder. I'd like to know kind of this is what the counselor would, and probably a dietitian. You definitely need a dietitian to make this happen. I can't give him, nutritional advice through a podcast, but see what his actual attitudes are towards different foods. Like, where is the fear? What's he scared of?
Yeah.
Does he think that, an egg, he eats 4 eggs and he's good with that. So it sounds like he's overcome that, but does he have a fear of another type of meat or of protein in general? Or some of this could be family of origin stuff. I mean, sometimes it's really interesting when you talk to folks, they'll have they'll have particular individuals they know of, and that it was just sort of like a salient connection. So it's like my ex-wife's brother ate a steak every day. He died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So so that's it right there. That evidence is absolutely damning to steak. And so, or whatever it may be. And you've probably heard that before. People have. Oh, yeah. And sometimes older folks will say the same thing over and over again. They'll tell you the same story. So figuring out what it is that maybe blocking him from being able to be more flexible with his dietary choices. But that's actually a really good, that dopamine-based diet is really good from a protein intake standpoint and a health standpoint. It's got fruits and veggies in it. Those fruits and vegetable intake, as opposed to supplements, are predictive of life expectancy.
I heard you mention that once before, which makes me feel good. Yeah. I've been eating more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, the phytonutrients that are in there are the things that we co-evolved with. So it makes sense that that we would live longer when we've got a diet abundant with the things that have been provided by nature over the course of our evolution. Yeah. It's like, okay, good. We got everything we need. You can live long lives. It doesn't make sense to turn over the species more rapidly to try to seek out better environments to live in when you're getting really good food and you're really healthy. You've got all those things that increase antioxidants, antioxidant quenching enzymes and detoxifying enzymes. Those are the things you find in fruits and vegetables. So he's got a good. Sorry, go ahead. What? I
was just thinking, because the whole fruits and vegetables thing, with bodybuilding, we can become so focused on just eating the things that are going to get us to our goals. And what are those? Protein being first, right? And then either carbs or fats. And then if you maybe had some extra room, or if you happen to be starving because you're dieting, then throw in a vegetable, you know? But yeah, I feel like that I've opened myself up more to try to add those things back into my life. I feel like it rounds me out as a human being more too. If that, does that make sense? Just being able to eat fruit again. It's it's freeing. Right. It's freeing. Yeah, you know? Of
course. Yeah. It's not going to make you fat.
Yeah.
Just eat, yeah. I mean, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
I had a buddy who lived on chicken and pineapple when he was in Thailand.
Oh, wow.
And like basically, they said that was pretty much all he was eating. He said he was shredded. Wow. He just ate as much as he wanted, and he did great. So,
nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, the thing that I've kind of built into I have different sort of dietary strategies in the Fortitude Training book, but a lot of it's a nutrient timing type of thing. You conjured it in my head is that in the peri and post workout period, you're focused on, it's a very bodybuilding focused type of diet. You're trying to like bring in the carbs, replenish glycogen. You want the insulin around to promote positive protein balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're just pounding, and that's when you eat like, you know, the skip load types of foods and pancakes, and just like, you know, you're just doing everything to sort of drive your bodybuilding recovery.
Yeah.
But on the non-training days, that's when you're going to have like some salads and maybe a little bit of fruit and lots of vegetables, and you're eating healthy fats.
Yeah.
So you're not worried about, you know, you eating salmon or, you know, which you wouldn't necessarily eat during the post-workout period when you're wanting to make sure you get enough carbs in to replenish glycogen. So it's kind of like I set it up for like you're able to sort of quench that bodybuilding, like I got to be focused and recover and, you know, make sure all this shit, I dot every I and cross every T post-workout. But then on the non-training days, you're taking care of yourself. You know?
I like that idea a lot more. It makes so much sense to me.
Yeah. So you're getting the healthy fats in, and you're getting plenty of veggies. So yeah, that's some balance, you know, day-to-day balance.
Yeah. I talk to so many people. I think of my parents that don't want to eat protein. Like they just, why is it protein is like the hard thing to eat? It would be easy to wake up and eat a pastry in the morning, you know, but to eat, you know, eggs and then eat chicken a few hours later, it's like, well, it would be easy to just eat, you know, whatever, peanut butter sandwich, you know, versus my parents, they don't like eating protein. I feel like if I could somehow bring them around, but it's their mindset. And I think there is like an older people mindset that they have their ideas of what food is and what food's supposed to be. You know, it's hard to change those things. Like you were saying, he could go to talk to somebody, a counselor of some type, but it might not be somebody they could really relate to begin with, right? Age-wise.
Yeah, that is tough for older folks. It's cultural.
Yeah.
Food selection is cultural. And we have, in the United States, we probably have the worst food culture of all time in human history.
Yeah.
I mean, we're awful. We're just terrible. What we consider food is just like mind-bogglingly atrocious. So many that people eat the things they eat.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. But that's what we're used to. And it's, you know, the foods, you know, they hack. I always harp on this, but they're basically hacking into the preferences that have been evolutionarily determined. Because when you found something sweet, that tasty, eat that shit, because it might not be around for long, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, we're designed to eat food when it's in abundance, and because there was no real obesity wasn't an issue for the most part in our evolutionary history, and there's plenty of activity, hunting and gathering and doing things. And we didn't have, you know, some of the societal things probably going on that give us all sorts of body image issues as well. There is like the kind of the most obvious example that's been studied in the literature is from back in Arizona. They call them the Pima Indians. Actually, where I live, Tucson, is in Pima County. The Tohono O'odham tribe is the actual name of the tribe there. And they're, I think it's like 7 or 8 out of 10 members of this Native American tribe, this Indian tribe, has diabetes. They're almost all obese. And they're a scenario of sort of localized Darwinian selection to survive in the desert, where you're going to have a paucity, a scarcity of resources. You're not going to have a whole lot of sugary, sweet types of things.
Yeah.
And you've just got shrubs and what you can find otherwise. So only those individuals who have quote unquote thrifty genes. This is the thrifty gene theory. People can Google that and find all sorts of stuff written about it. Only those individuals with the thrifty genes, which would basically make it such that whatever available energy that was in excess would be stored away for future use when there's a lack of food. Would be so stored. So when those folks have access to your standard American diet, the SAD diets, SAD, they just balloon up. They just pack on the pounds. They've got all the genetics to hold on to body fat because that had survival value.
Yeah.
It's past. Yeah. So, and it makes sense, that's part of how evolution works in general, is to have some variability in terms of that sort of thing, so that if indeed the environment more thrifty genes are advantaged, then you want to have some members of your population that will make it through those harsh times when food is lacking.
Yeah.
So you'll have people who carry more body fat naturally, and others who won't. It could be that there's some advantage, and nature just throws out the variability and then lets the environment kind of pick and choose what has an advantage. We sort of think it's kind of an intelligence there, and that's a whole other topic that could maybe be debated. But so maybe there's an advantage too in individuals who don't store a lot of body fat. Let's say for thermoregulatory reasons. You don't want to have extra body fat because it makes it harder to dissipate heat. That's the crazy thing about the Tohono O'odham, is that like all that body fat obviously it's not a good thing in Arizona to have excess body fat. Like it's like you don't want insulation. You want to be able to dissipate heat. So it almost just screams like that was not the original purpose of the adaptation, to survive in the heat, because that certainly doesn't help.
No, God, no.
It was those individuals, their ancestors were not obese, because it would not have been helpful in any way, shape, or form to be obese.
Right.
They were just able to pack on whatever extra body fat and be very, very thrifty or very, very efficient at storing body fat. So anyway, that's definitely an aside, but an interesting one, I think. So back to Kate's question about her dad, is try to figure out what he likes to eat, and then see if there's ways you can kind of match his attitudes and preferences to ensure he's getting enough protein through his diet. So he may love, there may be a comfort food. Who knows? Maybe there was beef brisket or something like that his grandma used to make, or maybe even ham, or whatever it might be that he might like, that he's not scared of, that's enjoyable, that would give him the protein. He's not getting that. I'd also see, she mentioned she got him some resistance band. I would check, because he was born with some congenital issues there, skeletally, with his fused hips. So, I know Kate knows to do this, but, obviously want to check in the orthopedic issues as far as lifting. That's just sort of worth noting.
Sure.
To see how hard he should be lifting, what he should be doing. I mean, if he's not doing crazy, if he's not lifting like Kate does, then he may not need, a whole bunch of protein. But I would start with the diet first, and that's a good template, the dopamine-based diet, and then see where he falls shy, and then supplement accordingly. So if he just doesn't like veggies, that just doesn't happen, then maybe a greens formula might make sense for him. And you could give him a post-workout whey protein isolate if it doesn't bother his belly with some of there's some really tasty greens formulas out there now. Yeah. And give him a nice little tasty, greens berry formula protein smoothie as a post-workout drink. Give him 20 or 30 grams of protein plus a veggie antioxidant boost as well. And he probably would like that. I don't think he's getting into this stuff. This is pretty cool. This is an older question, but I'm hoping that this is continued.
Yeah.
You can ask her next week and see what she says. Give us an update.
I will.
Her dad.
Yeah, I will, because I'm excited to hear this. And since this show will be out, the listeners they'll be interested in hearing too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So he was 152 at the time of this record, or at the time of this question. I wonder where he is now. That'll be fun to see. And 70, that's
12.
Yeah. At 72, that's great. It's great that he's getting back into it. What a cool way to really give yourself some like good purpose in life too, enjoyment,
Yeah, he went to the Olympia.
Yeah.
With her, and he's training. I mean, I know she travels a lot, so they probably can't get together that too much, but this would be really cool to see how he's doing, see what he's up to.
Absolutely.
Because older folks can make phenomenal gains. Like they can really they can do strength wise, really impressive.
Really?
The best. Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. It's crazy. This is what points to the fact that just lack of activity can be, especially when it comes to strength. They can gain muscle mass really well, relative speaking. They've got smaller muscles, but they can make roughly the same relative gains.
Interesting.
It's somewhat mixed. There's a study that a woman by the name of Maria Fiataroni did. It was published in like 1990. It was like one of the ones that like everyone cited because it was so freaking cool. They used nursing home patients, and all they did was knee extensions.
Knee extensions?
And I think they increased quad size by like 10. Just knee extensions. Okay. But they trained them. Here's the thing. This is why a lot of the studies initially with older folks, they just did. This is actually good. I bring this up. They just did like bands. They had them doing. The idea was that elderly people are fragile and that they just simply can't handle the same relative intensity. So, for them, if 10 pounds is a max lift, you definitely can't have them try to pick up, a 7-pound weight. That's 70% of the max because it's just way too much. They're going to break. They're going to fall apart. Yeah. And of course, there could be orthopedic things that, that you have to pay attention to. You got to be smart with it, just as you would with anybody of any age. But they trained them with, I think it was 80% of a 1 rep max. Huh. They progressively moved it forward over. It's only like 8 or 12 weeks in the study. And just knee extensions. And they increased quad strength by like 200%.
Wow.
It was really phenomenal, yeah. But the coolest thing is they were just measuring. What mattered was function. Who cares if they can knee extension? Yeah. Heavier weights, that doesn't really do them much good on a day to day. But their habitual walking speed increased substantially, so they're moving more quickly, so they're getting around better. And I think all of them, I don't want to overblow the nature of the study, but many of them who are using assistive devices like walkers or canes dumped them.
Really?
No, they didn't need them anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, and that was just knee extensions.
Yeah.
And some of that is probably literally physiological and maybe neurological. One of the things that, this is a whole other topic, but when it comes to falls and older folks is they will start to lose balance, and strength predicts whether or not they can catch themselves.
Yeah.
So if you start to kind of fall, you have to be able to develop force rapidly enough and be able to develop enough force so that you can catch yourself and keep yourself from falling and breaking a hip.
Okay.
And they're keenly aware because a lot of older folks, especially women, will fall and break hips, and that's not a good thing at all. So some of this could be just simply that when they had more strength, they had more muscle mass, and this is just like 200% increase in strength is a lot. It was kind of cool that it carried over because they weren't doing any functional stuff; they were just doing knee extensions.
Yeah.
But they may have had the sense of having stronger quads, which made them feel like they can walk more rapidly. So maybe it was psychological as well as just purely physiological. And they did have stronger quads.
Yeah.
So they started doing that, and there can be a self-efficacy thing as well. Like imagine like with those sorts of increases in strength, they probably were testing them maybe weekly and training them like 3 times a week. They were literally going in and blowing away their previous 1 rep max each time they tested them.
Huh.
Sure. So it's like every time they go in, like, some of them probably start with like 15 pounds, and the next time they're doing 20, and the next time they do 24, and then the next time they do 28, and then they're at 32, and they were just every week they were going up in strength, substantially. So that obviously makes you feel good.
Yeah, gives me some hope too as I get older.
I just found the study. Let me.
Okay.
It was published in 1990. 10 frail institutionalized volunteers, I'm just reading the abstract here, age 90 plus or minus 1 years, undertook 8 weeks of high-intensity interval training. Quad strength was negatively correlated with walking time, fat-free mass, and regional muscle mass. Strength gains averaged 174 plus or minus 31%.
Wow. And
the 9 subjects who completed mid-thigh muscle area increased 9%, plus or minus 4.5. Mean tandem gait speed improved 48% after training.
Wow.
Yeah. And they didn't say anything about the assistive devices being reduced, but I just remember that from reading the paper, because this was just really. I did a lot of work in the aging. I have a graduate certificate in gerontology, so I really am. There's so much that can be done to help older folks.
No kidding.
So, yeah. Let's see here. Yeah. Here it is. It just says. It said 2 subjects no longer used canes to walk at the end of the study. One of 3 subjects who could not initially rise from a chair without the use of arms became able to do so. So they had 9 subjects. So that means 3 of the subjects, they could just they couldn't stand up. Old folks, they have to push with their arms. They were able to do that. So that's noticeable. So yeah, cool stuff.
Nice. Well, that's cool, man.
So yeah. Excellent.
In an interesting direction too. I don't think we've ever talked. That's like a totally unique question.
Yeah. It was a good question.
Yeah.
It was, obviously relevant. It wasn't like, we weren't talking about, progestins and progesterone receptors or, how to prevent side effects, but an important. There's a lot of. I'm sure. I got my folks into lifting. My mom still lifts. My dad lifted as he could. Yeah. They did do it until they're older. I think everyone probably remembers Latz, who we had on the
of course
on the show.
Yeah.
Well, he was their personal trainer.
Oh, no kidding. That's right. You mentioned that once before. That's cool.
I pointed them towards him. So he was their first personal trainer while he had his gym open back in town.
Okay.
Back in Quincy, Illinois. Yeah.
Nice.
So there are probably a lot of listeners who have parents who they care about, who may not even they're thinking bodybuilding. It's just I want to look, really good during the day. But, weight training and resistance exercise has phenomenal capacity to do all sorts of positive health things. And this kind of stuff where people are walking more quickly and they feel better and they're able to have increased self-efficacy and their basically their life is better. Their quality of life is improved. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Maybe this will open even if it's just one listener says, you know what? I got to get my mom lifting, or I got to get my dad lifting because he's going downhill.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring him to the gym.
Or if they are, my mom lifts already, and it reminds me to be supportive of her and encourage that she continues doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. My mom won't do it without a trainer, but yeah, she just won't. But she does. But she goes. She does it. She just gets it done. She's disciplined in that. She doesn't enjoy it, but she enjoys. She's very social, so she enjoys being with her trainer. She's got great trainers wherever she's gone, whichever one she's had. So she just has a good time. She trains hard. She does what she has to do, and she's very happy when it's done. But it's helped her definitely. So
that's cool.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So what do you got going on today, Scott?
Today is just a catch-up day.
Yeah.
Things I trained yesterday. Yeah, I did another drop set, demented drop set day.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been posting. Those are kind of fun, man. I'm on a drop set kick as of late. It's just really fun. And just say, okay, how friggin' diabolical can I make this?
Yeah.
And I did a 7-stage drop set on a pull down machine, and I had done basically the same thing on a bent over row, and that was it for back. I was done. That was it.
Yeah.
So. How about you, man? What are you up to?
Well, this is it for recording for me, and then just I'm gonna go do a little bit of training too, and cook some food. I'm gonna learn how to make a shepherd's pie today.
Ooh,
yeah, I've never done
that. That's pretty cool. What are you gonna make it with? Are there your various filling options? I believe.
Yeah, I know nothing about this, and we're gonna use beef. I know that much. We mentioned on Bodybuilding Nerds the other week, Victoria Felker's hanging out. We don't use the word hanging out. She's here seeing me. We're
chilling.
Yeah,
chilling in Netflix.
You listened to that episode, I take it.
I didn't. That just popped into my head. I'm sure TJ said that, right?
That was we were equating like what hanging out means and like Netflix and that's like all the same. Like I think like the same thing, right? But we're not doing any of that. We're seeing one another.
Yeah.
So that's I'm making a big deal out of saying that way. But no, I've never made a shepherd's pie.
Like setting the Netflix up to create sort of a psychological distraction, so the subtle moves can be made. So like, what a great movie, and then the hand just sort of slides over by the yawn, the arm around.
You're blowing up my spot, Scott. That was my move.
That was your shit. Sorry.
That's all right.
I don't have any moves. I got no moves, man. I'm sorry. I got.
Well, I don't now. I got none now.
Yeah, right. You're out.
No,
maybe the shepherd pie thing will work out for you. Yeah. Could you show me that again?
Yeah.
Like, let's do that again. I want to see that. I wasn't quite sure what you did with the maneuver there with the crest. Show me one more time, please.
Yeah. Well, nonetheless, I'll end up full. I'm sure of that. But no, that's about it. Maybe a little bit of training, like I said. And I hurt my back over the weekend doing next to nothing.
Again?
Yeah, so it was next to nothing.
What was the next to nothing?
Next to nothing was, it's a T-bar row machine, like a platform that you actually stand on. And
I hate those are awful. Most of them are terrible.
I like them. I like this one in particular, and it feels good normally. And I only had I started out with 2 quarters on it. Second exercise in, was it second? Yeah, second exercise in. 2, maybe third. I can't remember now. All I remember is I hurt myself. I had 2 quarters on it. It felt okay, and I was trying to really bend over far so that I was almost my upper body was parallel with the floor. And then I put another quarter on. And what it was, I realized, same mistake I made before, I wasn't engaging my glutes. And I got...
glute? Was it a glute weakness issue?
It was. And that's the reason I've been wanting to bring them up, strengthen them, is to improve my lower back strength, which it has been helping. But I went in thinking that my back was healthy and strong, and I walked out with minor tweak again, which is enough that's going to keep me from training legs. But listen, I'm hopeful because I feel like I have an answer here, and it's continue to strengthen the glutes. So I'm going to keep working on that.
Semi-serious question here, actually. Are your glutes sore? I mean, were your glutes? Have you've been doing a lot of glute training? Were they sore?
No, they weren't sore. They were not contracting. That's my problem. That they haven't grown the way I'd like them to because they don't engage. It's like the hamstrings are really strong, the lower back is used to taking over, and that the glutes remain relaxed. So,
strange,
yeah. So, and that's been the thing. They don't fire. And sometimes if I were, what I could have done, I think. Had I done like just a little bit of like pre-activation work to actually get my glutes to fire before I trained, which you don't think of doing that, right? I'm training back. Why would I warm up with some glutes? But honestly, if I do that and I get the blood moving, then they become more likely to contract and it's easier to engage them. And then if I were to bend over at that very far degree, then they're more likely to contract and hold my body in place, working within the chain versus putting too much stress into another area. And I believe in my heart now that I'm getting closer to figuring out what my problem has been and able to work around it. Cause now that I saw that happen again, I'm like, damn it, I did that same mistake, but now I'm seeing it and I'm catching it more often. So Yeah.
Your mental checklist needs to be. I'm from what I'm gathering here. I'm not trying to tell you what you should or shouldn't do or have to do, but engage the glutes first.
I think you're right.
First,
yeah.
Make sure whatever you're doing, whatever you're going to have a sort of load you have to support.
Yeah.
Engage the glutes.
I think you're right. And you know what it was? I just wasn't thinking of that. And part of it was probably that, hey, this isn't a lot of weight. You know what I mean? Hey, this is easy. This is a warm up, you know? But that's,
You could think to yourself, what would Brett Contreras do? He would engage the glute off, right?
Right out the gate, right?
To keep the glutes going. Or like, yeah, if you were doing your glute training video, which I'm anxiously awaiting, you would make sure the glutes were firing at all times. Like everyone would be looking at the glutes, so you keep them nice and hard and taut.
Yes.
Hit the glutes and then go. That's it. That's what has to happen.
Absolutely.
So, do you arch your back when you're doing you keep your low back pretty arched, or do you let it round when you do back work?
You know what? I guess it depends on what I'm doing, but I mean, it's hard to explain. But I would say I would let it round a little bit on certain stuff, certain types of rows, maybe. Like on a Smith machine row, I might almost let it slightly round, but almost on purpose. But for the most part, I keep it pretty straight. It's not as much arched; it's been more or less straight.
How good is your hamstring flexibility? Probably
not that good.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm connecting there is probably to get into that position. If your hamstring probably means it's not that good.
Right. No.
If you do stiff-legged deadlifts with a heavy load, can you go all the way to the floor?
Oh yeah.
A barbell.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Go all the way down, or are you 8 inches high?
No. I can go all the way down, but it doesn't mean that they're not really tight still, you know?
Okay, yeah. So arching your low back is neurologically connected to the glutes. That's sort of the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and that sort of makes sense that you do that because the whole posterior kinetic chain is all kind of connected.
Yeah.
Like up top, for instance, I've always, you've heard me say before, when people are training their lats, arching the whole back seems to help with that, especially if people can't make it happen.
Okay.
So the whole posterior kinetic chain is sort of neurologically connected. So if you're doing that exercise bent over in the way you were to try to get yourself sort of parallel with the floor, your torso parallel with the floor, and you have poor hamstring flexibility, you're probably not able to do that with a lumbar curvature that's neutral or even somewhat hyperlordotic.
Okay.
So you probably had your low back rounded or at least kind of straight, but not like strongly engaged with the erector spinae. So your glutes wouldn't have been firing in that scenario, and that's exactly what you're saying happened.
That sounds about right too. Yeah, my back would probably be pretty straight, would be the way I'd describe it.
So you probably need more hamstring flexibility to do that exercise safely with that angle with your torso.
Well, that's something I can definitely work on too.
Yeah, you'll your hamstrings will get better with the flexibility probably, but they'll grow when you get more flexible.
Okay.
Probably that's just what a lot of people have found.
Okay. Well, I want to commit to it because I feel like I'm finally figuring out how to beat this.
Yeah, but every time the injury happens, it's from lack of glute activation. It sounds like.
Yeah, and that's when I'm finally starting to put those pieces together after years.
Right. Yeah. Hey, I'm not the pot calling the kettle black. It takes me decades to figure out shit sometimes,
Yeah.
I'm an idiot as far as that goes. I'll just keep banging my head against the wall until I realize, I'm bleeding. Look. Oh, it's because the wall there,
Right.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that you're doing all this glute training, and it's sort of a scenario of specificity of training because you're not training the glutes during the exercises where you're having the low back issues. You're doing the glute training, on those glute days or when you're specifically focused on the glutes. But those aren't specific to when you really from an injury prevention standpoint want to have the glutes activated, which is in those types of scenarios like you had when you hurt your back recently.
Yeah.
So you could, why not, like you said, actually that's a great idea, is to do some glute activation stuff and fine tune your consciousness as well as your neuromuscular system to say, okay, every day is glute day. Put on your bikini thinking cap. Every day is glute day. Keep the glutes tight. Like it's, that's like what I'm not trying to make too much fun, but a men's physique guy. Every day is abs day. You got to have good abs. If you don't have good abs, then that's it. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Bikini, every day is a glute day. You got to have good glutes. So, think like a bikini competitor would. Glutes are always on display. They're always important. They're always activated during all exercises, especially the bend over row types of stuff where you have issues.
Yeah, I think that I make a mistake often enough. I eventually, hopefully, learn a lesson. So I think I'm getting closer, Scott.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I hate for you to have like an injury that's not just like a little tweak, but one that is like a major structural setback that requires surgery or something like that.
Oh
that
God, me too. Believe me.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, you end up like Ken.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. Yours is better. Your back's better than Ken's, I think. So.
All right. Well, let's get out of here. What do you say?
All right, my man. Enjoy the shepherd pie.
Thank you, and enjoy your rest day today.
Yeah, it's gonna be really busy. I just no gym training, but I have lots of work to do. So
good.
It'll be fun.
All right, guys. For another episode of Muscle Minds, go to fortitudetraining.net and check out Scott's book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. Guys, we will see you soon.
Adios.
Advices Radio Network.